Welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection show features up-and-coming indie authors who sit down with us and talk about their recently released books. Join us as we chat with our next guest author. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Author Roundup. My name is Emma and I will be your host for today's episode. Today I have a special guest with me who is a self-published author of her latest book, The Key to the Whole Situation, Your Guide to the Akashic Records, and How to Use Spirituality to Support Health, Wellness, and Vitality. Stephanie is a board-certified health and wellness coach and Akashic Records reader. After many years of studying various energy healing methods and ways of working in the Akashic Records, Stephanie channeled this method that is detailed in her book. Thank you, Stephanie, so much. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Emma?
I'm very good. So your book has a super interesting subject, and I would love to learn more about it. Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yes, I can. And I know that subtitle is a mouthful. It's a little bit of a niche topic, even among metaphysical or spiritual books. So not everybody has heard of the Akashic Records. So I kind of wanted to put everything right there on the cover so people could kind of know, what they're holding in their hands.
Yeah.
The Akashic Records, I guess I'll start with that because not everybody has heard of it. So it's kind of a way of connecting with higher wisdom, but if you think of it like an etheric or an energetic database, so it's your story from this and every other lifetime that you've ever lived, if you believe in previous incarnations. So all of those sort of energetic imprints are stored in this etheric database. And if we learn to dial into it, kind of like you're tuning the dial on a radio, if you're of my generation where we used to tune dials on radios.
Yeah.
Not everybody is, but it's like tuning into the exact frequency that you want so that you can get the most helpful information for yourself.
Okay. And so, yeah, you touched a little bit on the Akashic Records. So, one of your themes of your book is about how soul level lessons and past life experiences can shape your current life. Can you share an example of how this might manifest in someone's daily life and relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a client, and this is actually, I include some transcripts in the book so that you can read like how a reading unfolds. And maybe if you ask this type of question, here's the immense guidance you might receive. So I had a client who had a huge fear of water. And by the time you make your way to an Akashic Records reader, this is not normally the first thing you've tried. Like a lot of people have tried traditional therapy or, hypnosis or many other modalities to figure this out. And those are also immensely helpful. But sometimes you just can't quite get, like, there's still something there and you can't quite get to the bottom of it. And I think Akashic Records readings and being able to access that information, your own information from your own database, is really helpful. So I had a client who had this huge fear of water, no reason in this lifetime for it, had never, been able to pinpoint it. Nothing happened in childhood, no reason that he could put a finger on. And what we found in his records was that he had drowned in a previous lifetime. And that kind of thing comes up really frequently. But the interesting thing about the records is it's like some healing work takes place as soon as you have the knowledge of it and as soon as you've kind of illuminated it in the records. So as soon as he knew that, then it just kind of faded away. And he obviously had to go do some real world, real time work and do swimming lessons and, ease himself into
Yeah.
it, but no longer has that fear. It was once it was illuminated, it just kind of can dissolve in many cases.
And so you mentioned that you have clients. So how quickly are you able to access these types of records within like sessions? Is it like one session or how long does it take
Oh,
to
it's normally one. Yeah, normally one. Yeah, and I do different types of readings. Some of them I talk about what I call the big three in my book, which is your soul origination, your soul purpose, and your soul's mission. So some people want all of that information to see kind of what comprises them on a soul level and how they're playing it out in this physical lifetime. Some people don't want that. They're like, just give me the answer to my burning question.
Question. Yeah.
So there's different ways we can approach, and different levels of information you can obtain in the Akashic Records. But I don't want to say it's a one and done, but that is kind of the beauty of the records is a lot of times this information comes to light. You're able to see it more clearly on an energetic level, bring it into
Mhm.
the physical and let it go, or implement healing or be guided to maybe healing practices that could be beneficial in healing you in the present moment. So a lot of times that answer will just come up in the first one, in the first
Wow.
reading.
And so how like known is the Akashic Records as far as healing? Does it come up like on a search when you're like searching certain like therapy methods, or how unique or how popular is it?
I think it's going to. I kind of think
Yeah.
2025
Oh,
is going to be the
interesting.
year of the Akashic Records. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting if are someone like me who you think there's, a bigger purpose to things and things are
Yeah.
kind of being aligned in a certain
Yeah.
way. I had my book, what I thought was ready to go a couple different times, and then it was like, oh, not quite. There's
Oh, you
something,
pulled
and there
back.
is like I ended up adding the epilogue after I thought the book was done because of some things that happened in my own life that I wanted to share. So I do think it's kind of a divine timing thing, if you believe in that, where I just feel like 2025 is going to be the year that it becomes more mainstream. Like most people have heard of astrology, and
Yeah.
horoscopes. They at least know their sun sign, that sort of thing, even if they don't do deep dives and learn how to like work with their charts. And to me, that seems like a foreign language,
Mhm.
where the Akashic Records work is very natural for me.
Yeah.
So but I do think it's going to become more mainstream, like astrology, and another sort of tool you can add to your tool belt as far as accessing wisdom and guidance that can be beneficial in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned like astrology charts and things like that. Yeah, that's been really popular. Not only like knowing your signs, but I feel like within the past year or 5 years, people have been really like, what's your specific signs, your
Yeah.
sun and your moon and all that. So as far as like your sessions go, you mentioned one of your clients had a fear of water. Is it always like something like a fear of something, or is it ever like more broad about wanting to know like your purpose, or what are some other examples about your clientele?
Yeah, I think what's my purpose is like the most common one. And
Yeah.
so that's why I started including that in readings as part of that big three, and why I
Yeah.
actually like included that whole section as my book doesn't have traditional chapters. It's broken down into 5 parts. So one of the parts is the big three and about your soul's origination and then your soul's purpose, which is totally different than life purpose. For me, anyway, the way I'm shown that in the Akashic Records is you have a soul purpose. It's
Mhm.
permanent. Like you chose that before you incarnated the very first time. So your soul purpose is permanent. You're going to play it out differently depending on your life purpose and your mission in each incarnation. But I
Mhm.
would say that's kind of why I started including that information as just part of it, because it was such a common question. I didn't want people to sort of, this isn't the right word, but I didn't want them to waste their question on what's my purpose, because it's such a
Yeah.
common. I started just kind of doing that. And I think that's one of the things I teach the entire method, the key in my book, so people can do this work themselves. But that's again like a one and done. And that's what I like about this. You don't have to keep going back
Yeah.
in and saying, okay, what's my purpose? Are you sure this is my purpose?
Yeah.
Get it once. That's you know how you're playing it out in this lifetime and how it may be impacting you. Like I said, like astrology, and you have your sun sign. Well, that's going to impact you in a certain way versus
Yeah.
and again, I don't know much about astrology versus your moon
Yeah.
sign or your rising sign are going to show you other aspects of yourself.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. Like your soul purpose is going to show you certain tendencies, certain aspects, certain
Mhm.
ways of being, but the way you're playing it out is going to be different in each
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah. And that's really interesting about like the one and done situation. I mean, everyone's different, but that is really like cool that this method is like, okay, you find out your purpose because a lot of people are like pretty impatient. They just want to know. And so
Yes.
that's really cool that the records exist and that is a way to discover more about yourself. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and like you wouldn't keep going to different astrologers and saying, okay,
Yeah,
well, this one
exactly.
said I'm a Gemini, but I don't know. So it's
Yeah.
more, and I know this is a little more esoteric and it's newer information and not as many people are familiar with it, but
Yeah.
really once you follow the method or, do a reading with me if that's how people end up doing it. I mean, my goal would be for people to be able to trust and access this information themselves, but
Yeah.
you do it once, you write it down, you learn about it, and then you just see how it impacts your life. But it's not something that you're dwelling on or going back into every day and re-asking and re-asking. You're just trusting
Yeah.
that that information is part of,
Yeah.
who you are made up as a soul.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the key as a method for accessing the Akashic Records. Can you explain more about what the key is and how it works?
Yeah, it's a symbol. And so I started out in Reiki is what sort of my first introduction to energy healing was. And if anybody's familiar with Reiki, there's a lot of symbols. You sort of draw them in your mind's eye, or you can even kind of trace it in front of you just to add a little bit of, I want to say, like formality to it. Like you're sitting and intentionally opening this system.
Mhm.
So you're not just, if you are somebody like me who's very intuitive or a natural channel, you are aware of the difference from when you're accessing your records and when you're just receiving this onslaught of intuitive information. And so part of
Mhm.
what was really helpful about the key for me is knowing, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm tracing this symbolic key. I am
Mhm.
opening my records. I'm in this space. This is the information I'm receiving from my Akashic Records or on behalf of a client. And then I'm done. And then I
Mhm.
trace it again and I close them. So it is a symbolic key. This is not the exact one. It is shown in the book, and I do have it on my website. There's an activation you access,
Mhm.
like an online activation you kind of watch and listen to once to sort of activate your ability or your intention to work with
Mhm.
the key. Everybody has the ability to do it. So it's intention is really what it boils down to, but it's a system where I think a lot of people access the Akashic Records and they don't realize it. Maybe they do it in a dream state or even like lucid dreaming where you're half zoned out, you're daydreaming or what we think of as daydreaming, and you get this really kind of epiphany or this big idea like, oh, that's the answer to my problem. Well, those are generally the spaces where you're zoned out enough to access this information and you're not
Mhm.
blocking it with your rational, logical mind.
Mhm.
So if we can do that consciously and intentionally, it allows us to receive the information in a little better way and not just like, oh, I was daydreaming. That could never work.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason I don't want to say I came up with the key because I did not devise this on my own, but I was in a reading for myself and,
Oh,
received this symbol, sort of channeled the information for it and just kind of started keeping track of everything and it turned into a book. So there's the key is in the book and how to use it, of course,
okay.
is detailed there as well, but it is an actual
Yeah.
symbol that you will work with in your mind's eye or trace it.
Okay. And so some of the common patterns and challenges people can face can be traced with these records. I guess my question is, so once they have that, how do they use them to identify and actually like break like habits and patterns?
Yeah, and it can be a habit, a pattern, a topic. You asked if it like sole purpose is what most people want to know, and that is usually the first one.
Mhm.
But a lot of people, want to know if it why they have a certain pattern in relationships. Like they recognize a dysfunctional pattern. That's the big one is
Yeah.
interactions with other people and not always
Okay.
romantic relationships, though many times that's the
Just like
one
social
we're
anxiety or
seeking.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it can be relationships with siblings or parents or, those are the ones that really get interwoven because you have two people's stories and two people's free will kind of And you can't control the other person's. You can only learn about your own and how the interaction takes place. And so the records are really helpful for seeing that interaction and what you both kind of signed up for while you were in soul level and how you're playing out those parts here on earth, and allow you to look at it from a less emotionally attached, higher
Mm-hmm.
perspective can be helpful. But yeah, there's no limit for what you can ask when
Mm-hmm.
you're in the Akashic Records, as long as you're being intentional with it. I have received questions from, childhood trauma and patterns and that sort of thing. And I do always, firmly explain I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a therapist, and sometimes things will come up like talk therapy or something like EMDR through a trained therapist or something like acupuncture or seeing a medical doctor. These things may come up during an Akashic Records reading. It's never what I'm expecting because it's never, and I did do intuitive readings and oracle card readings for years, and Akashic Records work is
Oh,
what I really clicked with. I think because
yeah.
it's being filtered through me to get it into the physical, but it's really from each person's Akashic Records. So
Mhm.
it's never what I expect it to be.
Yeah.
And anything can be asked. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you could say some may be like skeptical of concepts like soul level lessons and past life experiences. What would you say to someone who questions the validity of the Akashic records?
Um, I would say not everybody has to connect with it.
Yeah.
It's if it doesn't feel right to you, don't try to use it. I would say when I beta tested the method after I channeled it, I purposefully chose skeptics. I chose engineers, medical doctors, military. Some people, I chose an astrologer, I chose somebody who does energy work. So I wanted a wide variety of people, and I did specifically choose quite a few skeptics or people who had never done any sort of meditation, because it is kind of getting into a bit of a meditative state. So I chose people who had not done any sort of meditation or trying to access their higher self or their inner self or any of that kind of work. And all of them received information and none of them were skeptics at the end. I do think the Akashic Records is
So
sort of
cool.
a bridge between that, too woo-woo, too far out for some people, I had somebody the other day text me a really lengthy text review basically of my book
Oh, that's
and
nice.
said, just thank you. I was so worried that this was going to be really airy fairy, and those are the
Yeah.
words people use, like too airy fairy, too woo woo.
Mhm.
So it's a way for people who aren't necessarily into that sort of thing, people who don't come from a background, doing readings for
Yeah.
others or energy work or oracle cards or tarot cards or anything like that, anything
Mhm.
in that sort of spiritual, metaphysical, airy fairy, woo woo realm. Those people seem to really connect with the Akashic Records work. And I think maybe it is because it's more of just, you don't generally have to interpret the information you get. It is more of like etheric Google, where, here's my question or topic, and then
Mhm.
you receive the information. And for the most part, I mean, I've done thousands of readings and I've never had a single person say, I don't get it, or that doesn't
Oh,
seem right.
wow.
So that's
That's
fascinating
really
because
cool.
that's not true of other types of readings. Like some
Yeah.
other ones have to wait for the information to unfold or the person doesn't really connect with it. I was thinking about this just the other day. I've never had someone report back to me anyway. Doesn't mean it's never
Mhm.
happened, but I've never had someone come back and say, I don't think this is right. This doesn't seem right. And I mean, that's a lot of
That's
reading
big.
for a
Yeah.
lot of people. And so I do think there's something about the Akashic Records that seems more objective, less subjective, more, I want to say, factual,
Yeah.
plausible to
Mhm.
people who tend to be
More,
skeptics.
yeah, or more
Yeah,
logical. Yeah.
yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, and I love the way it's like, from what I gathered, it's more like instant, like an instant feedback versus like something like other healing processes or methods, such as like just therapy in general. It can take years and years for people to really like find their purpose or whatever like problems they're dealing with. And also like, could create even more questions than you had in the beginning. So it's really nice that
And you
like
don't get
people,
them answered maybe quickly enough for your
yeah,
liking. I think that we, as a society, we're in kind of instant gratification times right now, where
yeah,
it's like we're used to receiving our answers immediately. So
yeah,
I think even if the guidance from the Akashic Records is you need therapy, then it gives you a starting point in therapy.
mm-hmm.
Like you can go in and say, I had this
I do
dream or
it.
I received this guidance that, or this popped up, when I was daydreaming, however you want to phrase it with your therapist, however open
Yeah,
they are. And just, it gives you a springboard or a starting point. Like, hey, I had this, you know, thing pop up that I had forgotten about from childhood, if that's what,
mm-hmm.
you receive in your records. And it gives you a really great sort of head start on what to bring up with other professionals if that's the guidance that comes out,
Yeah,
rather than allowing it to come up organically over a series of maybe, 12 therapy sessions. If
mm-hmm.
you go in knowing what you want to work on, you may still need that therapy if that's the guidance that is what's most beneficial for you to heal this issue you're having. Then you at least know, oh, I need to see a therapist. This is the type of therapist I should see
Yeah,
according to my own higher guidance. And this is what I want to talk about when I get there. So
yeah,
it's kind of the fast track to healing, I think. And a lot of
mm-hmm.
times at the energy healing portion of it, like you may still have to do some work
Yeah,
here
for the
now in
healing.
the present, but the energy healing work can take place instantly in the record. So it may take some time to shift it here, but a lot of times once it's brought to light, we can clear it in the Akashic records, and then it's just like you have a knowing that it's already done, and so it
Mm-hmm.
happens more smoothly and more quickly
Mm-hmm.
in your real life.
Yeah. And so how many like Akashic Records specialists are there as far as like if someone researches, you know, energy healing and Akashic Records pops up, like do people like travel to see you or how would you say that they usually get started as far as finding out about this method and then what happens after that usually?
I mean, for me, it's all just been word of mouth, and nobody travels. So I don't do readings in person. It's never
Oh,
real time or live because, I open their records, I go into this kind of meditative channeling space, and then I audio record. So it's a stream
okay.
of consciousness. I'm not interpreting it. I'm not missing any of it by writing it down, and this comes over more years than I would probably like to remember. I'm trying to think. I mean, the key method itself was I channeled after I had been working with the Akashic Records for a while, but I
Uh-huh.
started studying energy healing and different modalities in 2007, I think, 2005, 2007. So quite a while ago. And then doing readings, I would say somewhere around 2010. I've been doing Akashic Records readings for, I would say 10 years, but the key maybe the past 4 or 5 years, like this specific
Okay.
method. So yeah, I mean, it took a while to get it dialed in and get comfortable with it. But what I've realized is in the Akashic records, there's always healing work taking place. So, like, as we bring these things forward, illuminate them, shift them, they kind of fall away, something else comes in. So, yeah, there's never any for me any predictability as to what the guidance is going to be if I'm reading for someone else. But it can be instantaneous healing or at least instantaneous guidance as to what you need to do for the
Yeah.
healing. A lot of times
Yeah.
people will get homework or what I call homework where they have, the guidance is to do like a certain meditation or a certain breathing practice or something like that for 30 days and then see how it's shifted. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's always work to be done, but the energetic healing can take place like absolutely immediately. I
Yeah.
think well, our human brains have trouble, we think healing takes a long time and
Yeah.
requires medications, and sometimes it does. Sometimes that's the plan, but sometimes the energetic component of it gets healed immediately and it allows everything else to kind of unblock and flow
Yeah.
more smoothly in our
Yeah.
lives.
And so is there any type of preparation that people have to go through before they come or before they have like a session with you? Is there like prep work or anything?
So on my website, I list everything I need. Somebody can just book a reading and send me the information. Most people reach out because they're still, even after reading the instructions, they're like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I'm conveying, exactly what I want to receive. So again, my hope is that everybody can do this for themselves, but it does take a level of trust. And with the Akashic Records, you don't want to keep going back in and asking more and more and more about the same topic because it's just
Oh,
going to get muddy and jumbled. So it is kind of like a trust fall of presenting it and trusting the
yeah.
information you get. And I've been doing it long enough that, I trust the information to be correct, even if it doesn't make sense to me or doesn't seem plausible for the person. Many times they come back and say, "Oh, that totally makes sense." So that's always interesting. Yeah, you know, you can present anything. It's just there's no real, I mean, people come to me, they fill out the email form, but generally there's some back and forth because the more information I think we provide going into the records. So, and by that I mean not just like more, but the more specific and dialed in your question or topic is, and the more
Mhm.
sort of backstory it has, which this is contrary to other types of readings I've done. But in the Akashic Records, the more detailed the information is that we give going in, the closer we're dialing that radio dial. So the more we're getting to like the most pertinent,
Or
beneficial healing information. So, I have everybody type out or send me an email with their information. I read it. If I have questions, I ask them. If I feel like it needs a little more substance, I'll ask them if there's anything else they want to add. And then once we have that dialed in, when I open the records, I read it in their words because I think that's really important to read it in the person's own words, or if you're reading for yourself, your own words, because I
Mhm.
think that's what moves that dial is, not me guessing how you would like it asked in the
Yeah,
record based on just a topic like, why do I have codependent relationships? I could say, why does Emma have codependent relationships? But that's not going to get us the same information as if you give me some backstory about how this has played out in maybe three different relationships and why you
yeah,
think it's
more
a pattern.
specific.
It's going to get us a lot more detailed information. And the odds that we're going to receive some healing work or healing practices or suggestions are far greater if we're providing details. So I
Mhm.
usually suggest, it's a balance. You don't want to muddy the waters with too much information, too
Mhm.
much extraneous information, but you want it to be detailed enough that you get dialed in properly.
Okay. Oh, that's so interesting. So, how has your work with the Akashic Records impacted your own life?
Hugely. Yeah, I mean, I didn't just kind of fall into this. I feel like I was given this method for a reason. It is a specific symbol that was not really in my awareness. So I did, channel that from the Akashic Records or from
Mhm.
some higher source. So my life has really shifted since this system. And it had started to shift, like I said, years ago when I started doing energy work and became certified to teach Reiki and attune other people. And it's been a gradual process, but like the most meaningful shifts, I guess, the most significant shifts were after I started working with this system with the key and after I channeled that. And it's for me, a lot of it is physical health related. I have a couple genetic health conditions. I've had a couple surgeries because of those. I had some really significant mold exposures as a child and then just kept repeating experiences with that. Things that can really affect you on a genetic or cellular level that people think there's really no way out of. And I don't ever want to misinterpret it that like energy work can cure all your ills or everything that ails you. But it
Mhm.
led me, because I followed the breadcrumbs of the guidance I was given in the Akashic Records, it led me to the doctors, the surgeons, the methods,
Yeah.
the things that could maximize the benefit to me. Do I still have the
Mhm.
genetic conditions? Yeah, these are genes that I have
Yeah.
in this body. Do I feel way better than I did 5 years ago? Absolutely. Am I more mobile? Yes, because I, followed the breadcrumbs of the guidance I was being given and took the action steps in my life to do these things.
Yeah.
So, did it take a lot of work? Yeah, but if you follow the guidance, you can, there are times that things come up that can make your life immensely better. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what happened for me. And it's not just physical, though that is a lot of how it is manifested for me, but also energetically. And I've had relationship patterns that I've repeated and repeated and repeated that I now finally understand. Um,
Yeah.
and and I think people, I've worked as an intuitive and an energy healer for many, many years, and people think, oh, well, you would have your personal life figured out, but really until you get to that very, very bottom of it,
Yeah.
why you might be repeating these things, you do still keep drawing these things in. So I feel like the past few years since I channeled the key is when things really, really shifted for me.
Okay. Wow. And so writing a book like this must have been transformative in a way. What lessons did you learn about yourself while writing this book?
I learned, I guess, that it felt way more vulnerable than I expected, and part of that is the epilogue. So the epilogue is what was
Yeah.
written after like my surgeries were taking place. Like I thought the book was done. I had turned the proposal and the manuscript in, and then it's like, whoa, wait a second, a lot of other stuff came up. So yeah, it just, I guess I learned that it felt, because it is, sort of, like I said, a niche topic, even among metaphysical topics. And it's not something that everybody knows about or talks about. So I have to explain it a lot. When people say, oh, what's your book about? Well, it's
Mhm.
about the Akashic Records. What are the Akashic Records? And, I'm a huge fan of science. I'm a huge fan of facts. I'm a huge fan of logic. I worked, in the legal field for almost 20 years. And then I'm also a board certified health coach. So, everything's HIPAA compliant, everything's confidential. It's like, those were my main ways of being. So it does feel, for now, moving into this being, my main way of connecting with people and putting
Yeah.
this work out there, because it is the most meaningful and has made the most changes in my own life. And I want everybody to be able to use it that wants to.
Yeah.
It has felt more vulnerable than I thought. Also, waiting
Yeah.
for those first reviews to come in was nerve-wracking.
I
And it was,
yeah.
things I didn't even think about, like, okay, the book's out there, my work is done. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, people are reading it, which
Yeah.
felt very, like, I felt very exposed, but
Yeah.
yeah, but also good because, once that happens, it's like ripping the Band-Aid off, then everybody knows about it. But
Yeah.
that was sort of unexpected to me, like how exposed it felt.
And so I'm assuming this is your first book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what inspired the idea to seek publishing and actually like turn your thoughts into an actual published book? Had you known about self-publishing before, or how did it go apart as your journey towards publishing?
Um, well, actually, that's not true. I do have one other book, but it's very small. It's
Oh, okay.
something I published when I was working for a crystal company, writing physical
Oh,
data for a crystal company. And so I turned it into a crystal book for kids, the stuff
oh,
I learned
that's
from
so
there.
cool.
I did self-publish that. So, but
Okay.
it's like that's so far off my
Yeah,
radar. It was 10
very
years ago
different, I'm
and
sure.
very small. But I was aware of the self-publishing process
Oh,
from
okay.
that. So this is one of those things like the breadcrumbs where I was just told this is a book and I followed the breadcrumbs and now it's a book. So that might be a little different than how I think other people may have, a burning desire to put their story, their work, their book into the
Yeah.
world, and they know they want to write a book.
Mhm.
I never, you know, aspired to put a book
Writer.
out.
Yeah.
So it was just the breadcrumbs thing, like,
Yeah.
the following the breadcrumbs. So
Yeah.
mine's a little different in that I have been a member of the Hay House community for many, many years. One of the first certifications I
Okay,
got
cool.
was as the Hay House angel card reader like 100 years ago. So I was aware of them and the fact that they hold a writer's workshop and then you can submit
Yeah.
your proposal to them under that. And that's how I won one of the prizes in their writer's workshop contest. I submitted
Oh,
my
that's awesome.
proposal for the key and they liked it, and I published through Balboa, their self-publishing house.
Yeah.
But it's a little different than most people who come at it wanting to publish. I didn't know what was going to happen. There's hundreds of writers that submit, so it was, I was really grateful they chose my project, but that's how it came to be. I didn't, choose self-publishing, though after having been through the process of it, I think I would choose self-publishing. It's very interesting. You do have more control over the book, and I think for people that especially write in the metaphysical genre, or if any of it's channeled, it's interesting. You almost don't want to change the words. And some of mine are transcripts from actual clients, and I really needed to be involved in the process and know that it was going to be printed exactly as it was written because these are basically quotations from clients. So I couldn't be happier with the way it unfolded. But yeah, that's how I knew
Oh,
about self-publishing, but I didn't go into it specifically with that in mind. But that's the
yeah.
path it took, yes.
Very cool. Yeah, usually author or writers usually just like do like a Google search and find, an imprint that is self-publishing. But that's cool that you knew about Hay House and the writing workshop. Was it one of the virtual writing workshops or was it a physical one?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
it was virtual. It was, let's see, it would have been during the pandemic. So I think everything was virtual or kind of at the tail end of that, started the workshop, and then I submitted this. The contest I won was June 2023, June 2023, I
Okay.
think. And it was released October 2024. So
Hmm.
even self-publishing takes a bit.
Yeah.
I know traditional publishing takes longer.
Yeah, and that's cool that you found about Balboa Press because they are associated with Hay House, and Balboa Press is like a perfect imprint for your book. So it's
Yeah.
it's nice that how that all worked out. When did you start? So when did you start writing your book, and how long did it take to complete it?
I'm gonna say 2 to 3 years from three at least, now that I think about it. From like just the thought or, when I got the prompt that this is a book to submitting the proposal to it coming to fruition and being a physical book in 2024, at least 3 years.
Okay.
I think I joined the writers workshop in 2022, won
Uh-huh.
this package in June 2023, and then it came out
Okay.
October 2024. So yeah, and it started just as notes and, audio messages to myself
Right.
and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. And so, can you share any of like maybe anecdotes of your writing experience, or what was your writing process like?
Uh, Interesting. Some of it was on paper, like I said, mine's not traditional chapters, it's 5 parts, and so they're
Yeah.
all vastly different. Part one, which I tried to keep pretty minimal, is more autobiographical. It's just kind of my story, childhood story, and then there's the process and how to use it, like the key itself and how people can
Mhm.
use it for themselves. And then you have the big three, which is that soul purpose, soul origination, soul mission. Section 4 is frequently discussed topics, which, like, from
Mhm.
doing those thousands of readings, the things that come up frequently. And I love this part. I'll just show you real quick. So, like, there will be a topic, like maybe you wonder about your higher self and how to access that connection. So then there will be like a deeper dive set off here, which gives you like, this is kind of how I would phrase it if I were going in, but you can put your own spin on
Oh,
it.
that's
And
cool.
then some journaling prompts and that sort of thing. And then I left, of course, extra spaces at the back to make
Really
notes because I
engaging.
always wish I had spaces in books to make
Yeah.
notes. So, and then, so frequently discussed topics takes up a lot of those space because I think, people don't know what they want to ask about until sometimes they see it. And then they're like,
Yeah,
oh, I could
exactly.
find that out in the Akashic Records. And then the session transcripts, and of course, the conclusion and the epilogue, which if anybody watches this, I encourage you to read the epilogue. I sometimes skip those.
Yeah, I
I'm guilty of
know.
that. Like, I think the book is done, and the epilogue is what was written after I thought the book was done, and it's kind of present day.
Yeah,
Totally different, but I think
yeah.
really relevant and helpful to a lot of people, especially those that have, like me, some chronic illness or
Mhm.
conditions. It could be helpful.
Yeah, okay. And so, did you follow, like, a routine when you were writing, or was it more like
No. So what I started to say was like the section about me, the first part, I did write that. Like I just sat down,
yeah,
typed that out. The rest of it was more sort of channeled information, or like the big three I already had mapped out because I used that in my own readings. So
Yeah.
that was pretty much already complete from where
Yeah.
I channeled the system just to use. So, I had to polish that a little bit. And then the frequently discussed topics I could grab from anything. The transcripts are transcribed sessions, so those
Yeah.
kind of were already done. I didn't want to change my clients' words.
Right. They're
But a lot of it came as, I would just be out walking. It's like, I don't want to lose this thought. This seems like a really big thought that I want to include in the book. So I started just using the audio notes on my phone and recording
yeah.
it.
It's such a
And
good
then
tool.
some of them would get very long though, and I would try to be listening and typing when I would get home. And what I discovered is if you open Word and you click the transcribe button and prop your phone up against your computer and play the audio file, it will transcribe it. And of course requires like a lot of cleanup, but
Yeah.
still vastly easier than
Good
typing
tip.
the whole thing or remembering it. So that's what
Yeah.
I did not to lose anything. And again, I think it's maybe a little different because it's a lot of channeled information. So it was like, I don't want to lose these
Yeah.
thoughts. If, this higher wisdom feels that it's important enough to be telling me this, I don't want to lose it or try to remember it in my own
Right.
words. So I
Yeah.
would just record a lot and then transcribe it and
Hmm.
eventually just kind of polished it and kind
Yeah.
of.
And so have you received any feedback or reviews? You mentioned earlier about receiving, you were kind of nervous about receiving reviews, but you received any? And what's some of the feedback you've received?
I have not looked on Balboa or Barnes and Noble yet. I know it's
Okay.
available both of those places, but Amazon's the one that most people purchase through.
Right.
There's 3 or 4 5-star reviews on there so far.
Ooh, that's
Um,
exciting.
it made me so happy when I saw the first, five those gold 5 stars light up because it just like, okay, somebody
Yeah.
read it and enjoyed it. That's all I need, just one.
Yeah.
And so now there's 3 or 4 5-star reviews. I've gotten quite a few. My book is available. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and there's a few local or regional retailers, independent booksellers who have picked it up. So I've had a few people email me, and then a few people very local that I know who don't normally read this genre of book who have read it just because they know me.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and they've sent me, lovely texts. Like I had no idea you did this type of work, or I had no idea I could access this.
Wow, that's
I would
so
never have picked this book up, but I'm glad I did, that sort of thing, which
mhm.
I think is even more, I don't want to say it's even more meaningful because I love everybody's thoughts that reads the book, whether it's email or, text or review on Amazon. I think you have to be a verified purchaser to leave one on Amazon. So some of them come through other venues, but I love reading all of them. But the
Yeah,
ones where people have never done this type of work before and are the skeptics, I think are especially meaningful because
of
they're
course.
at least open to it, and that's sort of, they're open to recognizing it, even if they don't use the key.
Mhm.
Maybe they could go into a meditative state and intentionally receive some guidance for themselves. And if that's
Mhm.
the way it works for them, fantastic.
Yeah. And so what advice would you give to a writer working on his or her first book?
Get the information out in whatever way you can. Like I just mentioned, if it is recording and then dealing with it later,
Mm,
also stay a smidgen organized. Like when you're done recording, maybe put something on the title. I had, about 20 audio files at one point that I hadn't labeled and had to go back through, and it is like a puzzle figuring which
yeah.
part or chapter you want to put things in, and mine is not a super long book, so I would think if you
Ooh,
had one that was like this, then it could really be a puzzle kind of finding where things go. But I think just getting it out of your brain, out of you, onto paper or onto your phone or whatever that looks like for you. I think that's the first step, just getting it out, transcribing it in whatever way works for you. Maybe you have all these and you just send them to a friend who
yeah.
types them out for you, but just getting them out because if you do believe that we kind of manifest things based on energy snowballing and the ball getting rolling, even people who don't work with energy, I think agree that there is such a thing as momentum. So, just getting the momentum going, getting the ball rolling in whatever way works for you, and not trying
Mhm.
to say, I have to sit down and write 10 pages a day, or I have
Yeah.
to follow this person's guidance as far as how they wrote their book. Nothing has to ever have been done before. You can have your very own system and nobody else has to use it. But just getting that momentum, getting things moving because energy begets energy. And so
Mhm.
like I found it helpful not to say I'm going to sit down and write 10 pages a day because what
It
if it
doesn't
didn't
come from
happen? Then,
Yeah.
I would feel terrible about it. But if I just went for a walk and I ended up talking out what became 10 pages, then it felt really good. So just find a system that works for you and it doesn't have to be anybody else's system.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that advice because I feel like that is true amongst a lot of authors that I talk to, saying that not forcing writing is really good for them. And yeah, maybe taking a break and, when you're on your break or like getting inspiration, like going for a walk and things like that can really channel more creativity. So yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice. So I really want people to purchase your book and read the first section of your book, the autobiography about you. But I don't think we've like talked about you specifically and how you got into energy healing and things like that. So, would you want to go into that, like your background and things like that, and what led you to this position of channeling energy?
Yeah, again, just breadcrumbs
Yeah.
is what I call them. So it was ages ago. Wow, is that, yeah, it'll be like 20, it's not that far from 20 years ago. Yeah, 2000, probably 2005 is when I started getting interested in
Okay.
energy healing. Probably because of, I had pretty disordered eating most of my life, binge eating, some self-harm in my teenage years. I would say like excessive alcohol use,
Mhm.
mostly, when I was young. But just knowing those things didn't feel right to me and always kind of feeling like I was in seeking mode, like seeking the root cause of this and not being able to find it. And so I didn't know what I was looking for, but at that point I lived in a pretty small area in southeastern Ohio, not a lot of, metaphysical practitioners. So I started
Yeah.
studying Reiki and became
Okay.
certified in that. And then I taught it. And then that led to learning more about my connecting with my own intuition. And then that led to doing intuitive readings for people. And a lot of times people want a tool. So I started doing oracle card readings and sort of channeling my guidance along with the oracle cards and doing readings that way. And then I I moved to the Pacific Northwest in 2014, I think, and then really kind of opened up to the Akashic Records work. I
Uh-huh.
somehow that came across my radar and I started traveling to do certifications in other systems and learn about these and really connected with this work. Like I knew it was the thing. Like this is
Yeah.
what
Oh, that's so
it just,
cool. Yeah.
it felt right when I was
Right.
working in the records. It felt right when I was channeling other people's information for them, not filtering
Mhm.
it kind of through my own intuition.
Mhm.
And I just loved it and did that for a few years. And then, at the same time, I'm experiencing my own health issues and relationship patterns and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so then I ended up, really just doing a deep dive into how can I heal these things for
Mhm.
myself once and for all? Like, how can I
Yeah.
integrate the information I've learned? And that's
Mhm.
when I was given the key and started
Mhm.
using that and really sort of more permanently shifting all of these things in my life. And
Okay.
then using it in my own readings, just automatically kind of using that method to do my readings for people that I
Yeah.
had been doing for years anyway, sort of segueing into using the key as the system of access and
Uh-huh.
then asking people to beta test it like, hey,
Yeah.
kind of typing up that document and the method and putting that attunement together that people can access and just saying, would you try this for me? And the feedback was amazing, the things that people were, finding out for themselves that they didn't know they could and
Mhm.
that have caused permanent shifts and transformation in their lives. And yeah, and then now it's a book.
Yeah, and it's so exciting that you wrote a book and you found out, what you wanted to do and your purpose and you've helped so many people. So that's really exciting and you'll help more with your book, which is really cool.
So
Yeah.
that is the goal.
Yeah. So speaking of goals, what type of goals do you have for next year? Like any professional book goals or any personal goals that you have?
No, the people at Balboa Press keep asking me, "What is your plan? Do you have a marketing plan?" And I'm like, "No, I hope people read it, love it, and tell everybody else about it." Like, I
Yeah.
really like my work
Or
has always just
marketing.
been word of mouth. So
Yeah.
I that is truly my only plan at this point. I do have a local book event scheduled in March here in Oregon. I don't even have details about that yet, but of course that will be on my website when I do, which is just my name. So
Okay.
yeah, that's the only thing. Maybe, I do plan to just continue emailing indie booksellers to see if they would like to carry it or, metaphysical shops to see if it would be a good fit for their shops because I think that's how it can connect with people that are already aware of or open to this work. But my big dream would be that just, people read it and other people see it.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're reading it on an airplane and somebody is a skeptic next to you. It's like, seems
Yeah.
interesting.
That's
And,
interesting.
it just
Yeah. Yeah.
organically
Organically
spreads
is
and
always
people's
like,
yeah,
yeah.
like it becomes a mainstream method or people turn it into their own. There's nothing that says this is my key and you have to use it in a
Yeah.
certain way. Like if
Yeah.
you become familiar with it, I think it is good to have some almost ceremony behind it where you're sitting and being intentional, like I mentioned at the beginning,
Yeah.
rather than just throughout your day. But,
Mhm.
if you're sitting in an intentional space and you find that you don't need the key and you know what it feels like to be in your records, then you're doing it. And
Yeah.
that's my hope is that everybody learns to channel their own higher source for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, I think the local opportunities are a really good idea because you're so lovely to talk to, and I feel like people would really like to talk to you about like your book and you explain it really well. Like, because I had no idea about Akashic Records prior to this, and so now I just feel like way more informed, and I will feel more informed, reading your book. I think that would be good, to talk to people about it as well, in a local setting would be is it really exciting opportunity, so that would be cool to do
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So I think that's all the time we have for right now, but before we go, I do want to ask you one more question, and that is, what is the number one message you hope readers get out of or take away from your book?
Number one message I hope they take away from my book is that they can trust the guidance that they receive. That their feelings, if they are in that intentional space using the key or their own method, that they can trust the guidance that they're receiving. They don't
Mhm,
have to second guess their own source of higher wisdom.
mhm,
They have unlimited access to their own source, and everything they receive from that intentional space is true.
mhm. That's really great. And so, is there anything else that you want to share today? I know you mentioned a website. Is there a place that people can reach you if they
Yeah.
want to connect with you?
Yeah, I think I am just my name on all social media. Like if you just look up Stephanie Tingle on Instagram and Threads
Yeah.
and Facebook, you generally find me pretty
Okay.
easily. My website is just my name, stephanietingle.com. There's a tab at the top that says the key, and that's where I just kind of have been adding to and compiling everything that has to do with the book itself, as far as the PNW booksellers that are stocking it
Yeah.
in their stores and then the 3 major online retailers that have it right now. But
Okay.
when I have events, I'll put them on there too.
Yeah, that would be very exciting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Stephanie. I hope you all the best with your book.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you so much. And if you learned a lot today, like me, and are interested in Stephanie's book, you can go to balboapress.com and head to our online bookstore to purchase it there. It's also available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. And we mentioned local bookstores. You can always go into your local bookstore and they can order it for you. You can give them the ISBN number. So that is also a great option as well. And please, if you do purchase, please leave Stephanie a review. I know she would love that.
I will.
And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.